It's the Auburn Observer Podcast. We're back. Justin Ferguson, joined by my co-pilot per usual, Dan Peck. Hello, Dan.
Ahoy, Justin. Great to be back in the Wings 94.3 studio. Really appreciate our friends at Wings for letting us use the setup, Wings 94.3, the classic hit station in Auburn, Opelika. You can catch Auburn University athletics, football, men's basketball, baseball, Tiger Talk on Wings 94.3 throughout the season, and classic hits all day long. Don Henley, Pat Benatar, Def Leppard, little Ozzy Osbourne coming up as well, fitting because he just retired from rocking. I guess he's stepped down as the Prince of Darkness and abdicated. So yeah, really appreciate our friends at Wings 94.3 for letting us use the studio.
Yeah, and for those of you who are not Observer subscribers who pay for the Observer, and we hope you do.
Still appreciate you listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate all of our free listeners. But AuburnObserver.com, $60 a month or $60 a year. This is the first free episode we've done in a couple of weeks because we took a break and then we came back with a new podcast that was just for subscribers. So we're back on the regular schedule. Dan and I were talking about this before we started recording. This is episode 498. 499 will come out later this week. It'll be a premium one. And then some point next week, episode 500 will drop. And Dan and I will both be in Atlanta for SEC Media Days. I'll be going to the Home Run Derby and the All-Star Game as well. But Dan's going to be holding down the fort pretty much all week at Media Days. We're still trying to
coming back to the small room, baby. Taking over in the small room next week.
We're going to try to formulate some sort of plan for our 500 episode. We're not going to make a huge deal out of it because it's just a number. But really cool though to think that we're going to be hitting half of 1,000 episodes of this. And by the way, I can put him on the spot a little bit. Observer co-founder and the dean of podcasting, I guess producer emeritus, Painter Sharpless. I'll just say this: he's got a pretty big event coming up this upcoming weekend.
Congratulations to the entire Sharpless family.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
How about that? The clan.
Absolutely, and looking forward to going up and being part of that later this weekend. But Dan, it's
one of the biggest events in the history of Parts Unknown.
Yes,
right? The wedding.
Yes.
The wedding.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, I mean, it's Parts Unknown is they're having to bring in extra security. And
getting
everything.
a flight to Parts Unknown. You were telling me off the air is not.
I'm having to fly somewhere and then take a train to Parts Unknown. That's how unknown these parts are.
That's a shoot too. That's real. All right.
Yeah, that is a shoot. So Dan, we're back, and let's see. The last time we did our podcast, we put one out last Wednesday. Since then, I went up to Lake Martin for the annual Ambush tour. Auburn is only doing 2 of those this year of their bigger meetings, I should say. I talked about it a while back. Did the Athens Alumni Club, which again was an awesome time. But with Hugh Freeze and Stephen Pearl taking the basketball slot for this one, I believe Bruce Pearl's been on vacation. I saw some people have been asking about that. Let's see, heard from John Cohen, Butch Thompson, and Larry Vickers, new women's basketball coach as well. So
I believe Cohen, Thompson, and Freeze will be at the Atlanta Ambush, which is going on during the Home Run Derby Monday night.
Monday night, kind of the precursor to Media Days, so that'll be a big one there.
Tickets still available, I believe, for the Atlanta Ambush as well.
They did it was a sellout, a hard sellout at Lake Martin.
We had some folks on the drive asking in the days leading up to the Lake Martin event about ticket availability, and apparently it was sold out for a while.
Yeah.
But the university website is sort of pointing out that there are some tickets still available for Atlanta.
Yeah. And so we've got some stuff to talk about from that. We discussed this before we hit record, Dan. The recruiting angle, I know that's been talked about a lot and discussed a lot. Look, my take on it, I think you have a similar take as well. We're not going to go too deep into it because I think it's been well established and well discussed on a lot of different platforms over the past week. My thing about it is that the way Auburn is doing their recruiting right now, I think in the combination of their strategy and a combination of the factors like having the streak of losing seasons, having a very young roster, the money involved in all that, it's a combination of factors that is not going well for recruiting right now. Doesn't mean it's doomed. Doesn't mean, you're making a ton of excuses for them. It could be better. It should be better. But I think ultimately, whether Auburn had a string of blue chips in their class right now, or they're in the state they're in right now where they're lagging behind in recruiting, to me, doesn't really matter until what we see in the fall, because that's going to be what's make or break, right? I think if Auburn had a ton of recruits right now and struggled this season, it wouldn't really matter. And again, I think if Auburn's struggling to recruiting right now and wins games in the fall, they can turn around. We've pointed to the Florida example in the past as like Florida was a team that was in a very similar spot to Auburn last season, got off to a slow start, but when they finished like they did and they felt like they had some momentum, they did recruit pretty well to end that 2025 class. Again, not gonna beat a dead horse here. It's been discussed by plenty of people, in a lot of different platforms of the past week. But I think just between the combination of this new era of the transfer portal and revenue sharing, and just the fact that I think there's a whole lot of Auburn football that's not going to get better until they get the results on the field. It seems to me like it's a lot of talk over something that might not matter in the long run, because what actually matters is what happens in the fall.
What happens is on the field this fall is ultimately going to be, the thing. And I think that for Hugh Freeze, it's probably unfortunate that the recruiting story has taken hold to the point where I would expect a lot of questions next week at media days about the way Auburn is recruiting.
Yep.
And I would, in his shoes, I would be trying to sort of judo flip that to excitement about the current roster.
Yeah.
Because that's maybe the underreported aspect of the last few months, is that Hugh Freeze seems to have the best team that he's had at Auburn thus far, and has a chance to have the best season he's had at Auburn thus far. And if those things don't happen, I'm not sure. If things were going well on the recruiting trail, I'm not sure that would save them.
Correct, because you'd be in the same spot you were the last couple
and
years.
If things were going well on the recruiting trail, would that hold through a disappointing season?
Exactly.
Even if the sales pitch was landing right now, would it break apart if it doesn't look? If you're not ready for prime time against Baylor,
sure. Recruiting in the summer is important. It is increasingly less important. I guess decreasingly important is probably the better way to put it there. In this day and age of rev share and all that in the portal, it's got to play out. And here's the thing, between what we've heard from Hugh Freeze and John Cohen, what he said, about the rev share and all that, and how that affects recruiting. Look, Auburn has picked their strategy, and they've got to let it play out. And until it plays out, it's just going to be a lot of speculation and a lot of pros and cons, and people arguing on both sides of the fence of it. I think they should be better. I think they could be better. However, the ultimate thing that matters is you got to win football games, on Saturdays and one Friday, in the fall, this upcoming year. I also think another just small detail about it that I guess it didn't really click in my brain until hearing it the last few days over and over again. But you got to keep in mind also this revenue share. If you have a salary cap, so to speak, you can play with, Auburn's got a young roster. And that money is if you're going to bring those guys back in 2026 and beyond, which is the plan for a lot of them, like a Cam Coleman or, some of these guys that can't go to the NFL right away. You have that ability to do that. You have to attack recruiting and your salary cap and your management on that with that in mind. And so that's another underrated value of this, because it is a younger roster. Auburn has a younger roster right now, and the best case scenario for them is that younger roster improves this season, they take a step forward, and they can bring it back and they keep building. And if that's the case, it's less important that they've racked up commitments in the summer. Should they be better than they are right now? Absolutely. Again, hear me say that. They should be better at recruiting than they are right now. However, without the results in the fall, one way or another, it feels kind of empty.
And one thing I read into John Cohen's comments from Lake Martin, I don't get the sense. Sometimes you would look at a situation like this, especially after the first two seasons Hugh Freeze has had on the recruiting trail and the first two seasons he's had on the field. You would think if if the recruiting is starting to dry up, maybe it's because some of the important people who can influence recruiting with their donations have gotten cold feet as far as supporting Hugh Freeze. You don't get that sense from John Cohen. Like, I understand why folks might jump to that conclusion based on just the fact that, like, look at how Hugh Freeze recruited his first 2 years and look at how it's going this summer. But hearing John Cohen, I don't get the sense that this is, okay, the confidence from the money faucet has been turned off until Hugh Freeze starts winning. And here's the other thing
as well, with NIL, with this new thing coming up, like, NIL has to be legit. It can't be this collective thing anymore where you're donating a bunch of money, and if you have X amount of money, you can go over and spend that. No. It's you have your revenue share that you can split, and then legitimate passes the mustard, NIL, that's going to be a part of it as well. Are donors and all that influence in that? Yes, but it is not a matter of these people aren't ponying up the money anymore, and that's why Auburn's recruiting is struggling. No, I think it's Auburn is choosing to use their money in a certain way right now, and they think that's the right way to go. And until the results that play out, it's again, like, you hate to be in this spot, I guess, because it's not a fun thing to say. It can feel like a cop out, but, like, you do have to let this play out. We do have to find out how this all goes. One of the things that we did talk about with Hugh Freeze, and one of the things I asked him about last Wednesday, because I was very interested in it, in his thoughts, and wrote about it on Monday, and what we wanted to talk about, really the first big segment here of this show, is Auburn's offensive line. And specifically, I wrote a story on Monday about a newsletter about Xavier Chaplin, because over the last month or so, I have seen more and more hype around Xavier Chaplin. Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports wrote a story citing NFL sources, where NFL scouting sources, where he says, like, hey, some people think he could be a first rounder. Some people think he's an early round type of guy. He's that kind of talent. And it's interesting because I think there's hype among Auburn fans about Chaplin, and there should be, but it kind of got diminished a little bit because he didn't go through the spring. And again, it's the offensive line. It's not like, Eric Singleton can catch a pass and fly by everybody, and you can look at it on Twitter and go, wow, that's awesome. Or you can see Jackson Arnold throw a dime downfield, or Deuce Knight throw a dime, or any of those things, these skill position guys, and you can say, wow, really cool play. Like, a lot of times for an offensive lineman, it's just, are you doing your job consistently? And that's not like highlight reel material. Even if he was healthy, I don't know how much more hype he would have gotten, but the fact that Xavier Chaplin did sit out in the spring because he had, cleanup surgery on his shoulder, something that he had dealt with at Virginia Tech and played through at Virginia Tech, I think that affected some of the hype around him. But even still, there's a lot of excitement around him, and there should be, because as I wrote on Monday, not only is he a really, really good player, and we'll dig into that, but there is a ripple effect. If he is as advertised, it could have a huge, huge ripple effect across the entire offense.
You look at the last 4 seasons of Auburn football, and it's like Auburn has lost in different ways, right? Like, these teams have been different in their own ways, right, and it has not been uniform and consistent. And but one consistent thing, one trend, has been inconsistent offensive line play.
It was the downfall of Gus Malzahn, ultimately.
Especially at the tackle spots, right? I mean, the interior is important, too, especially if you're trying to, if you want to run the ball the way Auburn wants to run the ball.
And Auburn's got to improve on the interior this year, for sure.
But tackles have been, Auburn has searched across the world of college football, including going to Germany, right? I know he was in America playing junior college, but, Killian, like, you think about the different options Auburn has explored, from guys that were developed internally, to junior college players, to mid-major transfers, to major conference. Like, they've tried a lot of different things. They have not necessarily landed on the kind of consistency you need to. I think folks would point to the red zone as one of the spots
where that Auburn could not run the ball in the red zone last year was as alarming and as damaging to their offense as the fact that they struggled throwing the ball in the red zone. Like, yes, Peyton Thorne, the offensive execution, the play calling, all of that in the red. When you see dropping back and throwing, and these kind of fruitless passes towards the end zone, or these stalled out drives throwing the ball, that played a part in it. But the other thing is, Auburn really, really struggled at running the ball in the red zone. And the year before, they had been pretty good at it, statistically speaking. So the offensive line play has been inconsistent. So here comes Xavier Chaplin. Xavier Chaplin was rated as the number 2 offensive tackle in the portal by 247 and on 3. Isaiah World, who went from Nevada to Oregon, was the only one ahead of him. Hugh Freeze, when I asked about Chaplin the other day, he said, well, we had Chaplin as number 1 on our board. And again, you'll hear that a lot of times from coaches and stuff. And so, well, actually, the guy that we got, we thought he was number 1. It's not a stretch at all to think that Xavier Chaplin was your top player because he played really, really well at Virginia Tech. Isaiah World, people really, really like. He was playing in the Mountain West last season. So, you can kind of see that, comparison there. The thing with Chaplin that struck me as interesting heading into this season, Dan, is this was a guy that as a redshirt freshman was honorable mention All-American at Virginia Tech. His numbers are really, really clean. If you look at Pro Football Focus and you look at sacks allowed and pressures allowed, his rates of pressures and sacks allowed over the last 2 seasons would be the best of any Auburn left tackle since Prince Tega Winogo, who just so happened to be one of the last offensive linemen to get drafted from Auburn.
Did he go in the same draft as Driscoll?
Yes, I was going to say those two guys were both 2020 guys, I believe.
I mean, you have not seen, and I think Driscoll's still in the NFL, but I think or at least was. I mean, but it's. I mean, that's a position where you have not seen a ton of representation as far as guys who actually get on the field.
Auburn has not had a day 2 NFL draft pick on the offensive line since Braden Smith. They have not had a first-round NFL draft pick on the offensive line since Greg Robinson, 2014. So it's been a while. Yeah. This has been a position that has struggled to get to that point. We will see if Chaplin is a first-round type of guy.
And getting to the NFL is not the only thing, but it's usually a mark of the best. I mean, there's usually a correlation between the NFL, the offensive line that you view as the best in college football,
and guys going to the league,
and guys moving up to the league. And in this league, like half of the if usually when you look at the top 10, top 12 offensive lines in college football, you've probably got 5 or 6 SEC teams in that. So
especially with Oklahoma and Texas in the league now.
Makes it even harder if you're not one of those teams.
So with Chaplin, just a really good protection. His presence there is impressive. I mean, you look at him, his statistically at a power conference level, he has put up some numbers in pass pro that if he does the same thing at Auburn or a similar thing at Auburn, you're talking about maybe the best full-time left tackle that they've had in several years. Now, there's a caveat to that. Dillon Wade, when they got Dillon Wade 2 years ago out of the portal, he was the top offensive tackle. Problem with Dillon Wade is that he's 6'4". And so if he's going to play in the NFL, he's almost assuredly going to have to play on the interior. Last season, Auburn tried to have Dillon Wade be a guard.
I think Dillon and Gunner were the top. Gunner Britton were the top 2 tackles in the junior college rank, or no, the top 2 tackles in the portal. From D1 football, like the top 2 guys that
in that
previous
class,
year, and Auburn landed both of them, which shows you how urgently Hugh Freeze tried to address the offensive line problems from the moment he arrived.
Look, Dillon Wade's worked out. You look at him statistically. I know Auburn's offensive line has not been great as a whole the last couple of years, but Dillon Wade's numbers have been pretty good, and he's had to move around. He's played tackle, he's played guard. Last season, they wanted him to play guard. He started off as a guard, but Percy Lewis struggled so much at left tackle. When they pulled him out of the starting lineup, they had to move Wade back out to tackle, and they had to shift from there. I
wouldn't be surprised to see Wade. I know we've speculated about this. If something happened to Connor Lew, I wonder if Dillon Wade's played enough college football that they might even look at him as the center.
Yeah,
because I think they like some of their other guard options. Where if it were a long-term sort of deal, like, as far as we know, Connor Lew's recovery is on schedule and he's going to be ready to go. If Connor Lew were rendered unavailable for a stretch, I think they would seriously look at Dillon Wade as the option there at center, just because he's a cerebral guy. And then He's played
6-year college football,
and he's played everywhere on the offensive line. Yeah. It's like he knows where everyone is supposed to be.
As long as he can snap well.
Yeah, and that's something
good enough.
And I believe there was talk of him taking.
Yes.
You know, he'd been working some.
He has worked some at center at some point.
So I wouldn't be shocked to see that in the cards as well. But I think the ideal would be Connor Lew has a strong season, and you don't need to really kick the tires on anybody else at that position.
Dillon Wade's graded out as a really good pass protector. He's bouncing between left tackle and left guard these last couple seasons. If you have Chaplin there, Chaplin and Wade on the left side, the blind side, and I know in shotgun offenses it's less, it's not like the old days where you had your back completely turned and you needed to, but it's still the more important side to have your pass pro at.
If your left tackle's a weakness in a shotgun offense, the answer's not going to be
your quarterback's going to hurt.
Yeah, and what's going to happen is, because we've seen this at Auburn, is your quarterback is going to run, to try to extend plays, and people will think your quarterback is gun shy or doesn't want to stand in the pocket and get hit. And it's like, no, before the left tackle has been beaten before the play has developed. And if you want to keep it going,
if you look at Percy Lewis's sack numbers and pressure allowed numbers from PFF last year, it's just they had to move him, they had to replace him because it was not going well.
And I think there's an element of that in the Bo Nix story at Auburn. I think there's an element of that in. I mean, I don't know what kind of quarterback Robbie would have been with ideal protection, but he's still he was more than willing to try to make plays with his feet, and then even Peyton. The last couple of seasons, I think there was some of that, and if you can stabilize that, not that Jackson Arnold can't run.
Yeah, you're going to want him to run.
You're going to want him to run, but I don't think you're going to want him to scramble to extend plays that rather than stay in the pocket and deliver the ball. If that's
you're going to want
design
runs to be the kind of thing for him, or options and stuff like that.
Improvisation. Quarterbacks have had to improvise too much, at Auburn, and I think that's in part because the offense.
And it's hard to run a consistent offense that way. It's really, really hard to run a consistent offense. There's a reason. It's
tough for the receivers because you don't know what the timing is going to be.
I mean, there's a reason why there's a reason why there haven't been very many Johnny Manziels, where it's just it is kind of backyard football-y, and he could make stuff happen out of nowhere so well. And Bo had some of that in his game as well.
If being Lamar Jackson was easy, there'd be.
But even Lamar,
but you're right, and they've made it. I feel like they've made it more rigid, over the course of. It felt pretty wide open with Petrino, at Louisville. Yeah. But I feel like over the course of his time in the NFL, they've
he's
decided
at his best when he's got that protection, and he can tuck it when it. You want a guy who can scramble. You want a guy to be able to tuck it and go because nobody's open or he sees a lane. Less than he's having to scramble out of necessity.
And I used Lamar because we were talking about sort of the quarterback. To me, I mean, the greatest improviser is Mahomes. It's extraterrestrial sort of what he can do after the breakdown. But you're right. I mean, that's a very, very difficult way to that is
it's a hard way to live at quarterback.
It's the enemy of consistency for an offense for the most part. Mahomes is the exception, and if you can
and even still, the Chiefs usually have one of the better offensive lines of football.
They
had that one Super Bowl where he looked like he was going to die.
So many of them turn into highlights that it sort of becomes but you're right. So more often than not, they're running they're running pretty detailed stuff as well.
So back to Chaplin, he's got everything you want in a left tackle. He's enormous. He's got a great frame. Freeze talked about how he likes how he moves, the length. They are looking at him as a game-changing type of player, potential all-SEC type of guy. And we'll see how that works out. But I will say, though, if you have Xavier Chaplin at left tackle and you can keep Dillon Wade at guard, it changes so much for your team because now you're at a point, Dan. Mason Murphy at right tackle coming from USC. Here's the thing about Auburn's offensive line, and it's not a guarantee that what I'm about to say equals success, but it's a good sign, usually. Auburn's offensive line, if you go for a first-choice offensive line, which we think right now, and they still got to compete, they still got to win these jobs.
It's going to be about the amount of football these guys have played.
Well,
or the
how
ages.
About this?
Yeah.
You got Xavier Chaplin at left tackle, Dillon Wade at left guard, Connor Lew at center, Jeremiah Wright at right guard, and Mason Murphy at right tackle. All five of those guys have started multiple seasons at the power conference level on the offensive line. When was the last time you could say that about Auburn's offensive line? Long time.
Yeah,
very long time.
I mean, multiple.
Maybe back to that 17 offensive line.
And it just that's a
Even
position.
then.
Like I understand that you might get skittish at certain positions in college football if the room is full of 5th and 6th year guys.
Not offensive line.
I feel like offensive line is a spot where it's that's one where the more you play, generally speaking, the better you get, and the best offensive lines in college football probably tend to be the more veteran offensive line. It's not the only thing, but you're right. That's a sign that that's a signal that you might be in a better position than you've been in recent seasons.
Chaplin's graded out really well as an individual at left tackle. I think if he can be what he was at Virginia Tech, you're looking at a guy who's one of the better offensive tackles Auburn's had for the last several years. That's a huge move. Then you get into a spot, Dan, where not only do you have those 5 multi-year starters on the offensive line, what else do you have? Too Tall Miller, who has starting experience. You can swing him, right? Tyler Johnson, who has some starting experience. You're talking about your depth at that point being even more experienced, even more quality, on paper.
They seem to really like Drake Carter and Ty Buster, too. Like, there's a couple of young guys who don't have starting experience where the buzz is they could be pushing. Like, if Auburn has to go to the reserves or if there's a surprise on the depth chart between now and the start of the season, it could be one of those young guys making a play for a more significant role.
Yeah, 100%. The thing also about this offensive line that you could look at is we talked about Chaplin, his individual stats. Mason Murphy at right tackle, I don't want to overlook him because I like Mason Murphy's numbers as well. His pressure rate, his sack rate were good. Those were good numbers, solid numbers for a guy who's been a multi-year starter at the Big Ten. What's interesting about Mason Murphy is I look at him as, well, let's look at what he just came from. Virginia Tech was an offense that had its ups and downs, but Chaplin graded out as a really good guy on that front. Murphy was a guy, look at last season. USC was top 20 in the country and fewest sacks allowed per game.
It's still weird to call him a Big Ten.
Yeah.
Big from that Big Ten powerhouse. Yeah. I know. And eventually it'll get normal, but
like top 20 in sacks allowed, like lowest sacks.
I still say Pac-10.
Fewest sacks allowed. But they were 7th in passing attempts. So this is a team that dropped back a ton. I know they do RPOs and quick stuff a lot, but it's a team that dropped back a ton to pass, didn't give up very many sacks. On top of that, was a pretty good rushing offense last season, good scoring offense. So, he is coming from a successful offensive line. And you're going to plug him in to an Auburn offensive line that, again, I think a lot of times with your offensive line, Dan, we were saying about this with, watching the highlight reels and all that, you don't need your offensive linemen to be superstars. It's great if you have one, and Auburn's had a couple over the years. But, most of the time, you just need consistent, do-your-job play, everybody working together as a unit, and letting that, it is the dirty work. It is kind of the unsung hero of the offense that group is. And it's like what you were saying, before we started recording it, Auburn's offensive line play, everybody knows it's been a factor, but, it's not as popular to talk about or dissect or break down these last few years because it's kind of an enigmatic kind of position group, right? Unless you're Cole Kubelik, you probably don't know a ton about playing offensive line and the ins and outs that go out.
It's like pre-sabermetric baseball where it can sort of be whatever you need it to be for the purpose of your argument.
It is
right?
it's very nebulous to try to break down offensive line play if you're not an offensive lineman or you're not a real a coach. Or that's one thing where it's I hate to be well, I coached or I played football, so I know everything. I don't like that kind of analysis, and I think some people are guilty of that from time to time.
Here's specifically what the offensive linemen need to do to get better. Here's their technique.
Yeah.
It's no, we're not.
No. I can sit here and say, as somebody who never played it down or organized football in my life, there are things in football that I understand and can break down, especially analytically, statistically. That with all the type of metrics that we can go to.
And there's also situations where
offensive line play, though, I throw my hands up and be all right, that is a group where it is the toughest position group to look down because it's A, the guys who are the best recruits aren't always the best players. B, it is a unit where you have seen guys who are no star recruits, no names, become superstars in the NFL. And 3, it's like that is a position group where if one dude screws up, the whole thing looks bad. And it's tough to really break down. Like even when we were talking about PFF earlier and like this guy allowed this many sacks or this many pressures. Okay, they can see that breaking down, but they don't know the play calls. They don't know all the ins and outs of that. They can get close to it. But like I'm even scared like whenever there is a sack or something happens on a play, unless it is clear that the guy had one job and like he was blocking that one guy and he got beat and that's it. Like,
which is why it's usually easier to pin it on the tackles too, because it's like, all right, he was on the.
Well, what about a stunt? What about a twist? What about sliding? What about like all that kind
usually
of
he's doing a lot of work in that sentence, but no, you're right. That's a and because it's just
so tough.
I think folks have the natural inclination to watch the ball.
Yes.
Right, so it's like it sort of becomes sort of an after the fact,
and it's so hard to find stats. Like I can talk about like here's the thing, like with a wide receiver, like an Eric Singleton or a Cam Coleman. I did this recently a few weeks ago when I wrote the Malcolm Simmons story. There are so many tools in our toolbox where we can break down a receiver and say, hey, this dude averaged this many yards per route he ran. This dude, caught the ball at this rate. This dude was doing this yards after catch. This dude had this kind of efficiency on these types of passes. We have so much, and it's even more for quarterbacks. You can break down.
It's the difference. You know what it is?
Offensive line, it's like, all right, did they give up sacks, and how good did the team do when they were out there? And like that's kind of it, and that's tough to break down.
It's the difference between telling me how a right fielder is doing at the plate versus how a catcher is doing behind the plate defensively.
Yeah.
Right, like it's like, all right, give me like very because and even those some of those numbers, like tell me exactly how strong of a season, and maybe the catcher's the position to pick, but it's like tell me exactly how strong of a season defensively this guy is having, and even folks might take how scientific are these. I think that's the same thing going on with the offensive line, where it's like even the grades and even the percentages that you can use, even some of the hard stats, like those are. There's.
I also go back to the fact like
question about what's going on. What's going in.
I also go back to the fact that like a wide receiver can run the wrong route on a play and it can work. If an offensive lineman just screws up, like it plays usually dead, and it's like everything can look bad because of it. So again, for Auburn, it's like can they find that consistent group? And look, they're gonna have to be ready. Those guys we mentioned, Too Tall, Tyler Johnson, DeAndre Carter, guys like that, like they're going to have to be ready because. You cannot play this violent and brutal game where you slam in, and then these guys slam into each other on every single play, every single snap. We know how dangerous it is, and we know how tough it is on these bodies.
And these are bodies with miles on them, like you
correct.
just said. These are all guys who have played a lot of college football.
And the long-term effects of this is the long-term effects of playing the offensive line and defensive line are scary, and it seems that technology-wise and prevention and, like, we've gotten smarter and better about this moving forward, but it's still scary. It's still, like, the fact that these guys sign up for it is crazy, but they do it, and they know the risk. The short-term effects, so what we're talking about right now is, like, offensive line, it is a meat grinder, man. Like, the short-term effects is, like, yeah, Duke could get rolled up on, and now you're having to play the rest of this game or the rest of this month or the rest of this season with a dude you might not have been ready to go for on the offensive line, and that changes so much because when you plug that kid in, when you plug in a newcomer in, remember, this is a unit that has to work all in concert with one another, and you change one component, it can affect so much more.
It's got to be like sumo wrestling in the sense that, like, if you're good at it, it's got to be fun. Pushing the folks around, but watching it from the outside.
It's kind of like playing goalkeeper in soccer to an extent where it's just like you got to be a special kind of crazy to do this. And I say that, and I'm not saying that derogatorily. Like, I'm saying that kind of lovingly at that point. Like, you have to be a special kind of like, hey, this is going to hurt, and this is going to be really brutal on my body, but like, I'm really good at it, and I want to keep doing it.
And there probably is something to why we've seen...
It's like bull riding.
I was going to say, it would explain why we've seen combat sports athletes transition into playing football at the line of scrimmage. Wrestlers, and vice versa, where you'll see guys who played at the line of scrimmage go into professional wrestling or MMA or boxing or other sports where it's like, yeah, it's
because they're tanks,
yeah, and it tanks with the desire for contact, for imposing their will on an opponent, and that's we've seen the first 2 years at Auburn too. even when they feel pretty good about the starting lineup, they're going to want some other guys to get in there and rotate and keep the starters fresh in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. And that's where if it's Too Tall, if it's Carter, if it's Buster, like there could be some Dylan Senda, like there could be some other guys that get, There
might be some times where they have to steal some snaps, and that's not very popular, but it's getting a little bit more popular these days just because we know how tough this position is, especially in a season. Like, look, Auburn hasn't made the playoff yet, and Auburn's going to have to go exceed expectations to make the playoff this year. But also think about it, the seasons are only getting longer. We're only expanding the playoff. We're only doing things more and more. It's getting more and more brutal to play this game because of the longevity these guys have and just the amount of games they're going to have to play. So that is something where, you want to be as deep as humanly possible. And that's where going and getting Chaplin and Murphy meant so much for this Auburn team, because it's like, okay, now do you feel like you're reinforced your tackle spots with guys who have done it before at the power conference level for multiple seasons and have done well. Then it has this trickle-down effect, this ripple effect around across the offensive line where it's like, this guy might not be one of our top 5 guys, but he can be ready. And that's better than saying, okay, you have to be one of our top 5 guys right off the bat when we're fully healthy.
Yeah, I wonder how many teams in the SEC have an offensive lineman not slated to start as accomplished as Too Tall. As far as what,
and the thing with Too Tall is Too Tall's going to have a chance to start this season.
And maybe
he's going to still compete. Yeah, I mean, those guys have to earn those jobs. The thing with Too Tall, if you look at his numbers and you look at kind of his plays, there's a lot of potential there. His highs are really high. It's just the consistency. This is a dude that I believe Too Tall was SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week from the Kentucky win, right? And now he might not be starting this year, not because he's a bad offensive lineman, but it's just that Auburn has gone with a more established, or at least gone out and gotten more established, at the very least competition, at the most guys who can start.
And I don't want to get the timeline wrong, but I'm pretty sure we were a couple weeks into the portal when Too Tall got the year of eligibility back. I think
that's right.
I think Auburn went into the portal thinking Too Tall was out of eligibility, and then
that there was a question that he could come back.
And I think the Pavia stuff came down in December that gave the extra year of eligibility to the junior college players. I think that opened up the door for Too Tall to play another year. But right. Auburn sort of addressed tackle thinking Too Tall was gone, and then went ahead and brought him back. And you're right, he could end up start. But you know what? If that's true, then I would ask the same question about Mason. Right? It's how many schools in the SEC can go to the bench and say they've got a tackle like that? So I think that's where that's where the hope would be, that they've assembled the right combination of experience and skill.
And look, the thing we have said more than anything recently, I think, in light of the Hugh Freeze tenure at Auburn, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, recruiting success doesn't guarantee you anything, right? Just because you have more talented players doesn't automatically mean you're going to win more games. It's usually a precursor to it.
Well, how about this? Just because you recruit well in the eyes of the recruiting services doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a more talented team. The guys have to actually pan
better
out.
Playing team,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of, well, just because you have the more talented team, are you going to play a better game of football against your opponent and do the things you need to do to win?
All that to say, Auburn's offensive line looks like it's the most talented unit they've had in a while. It's the deepest unit they've had in a while. It's the most experienced unit they've had in a while. Could that be – I don't think it's – look, we've talked about quarterback left and right, and I don't think at all of Auburn's problems on offense last season can be attributed to Peyton Thorne, much like I don't think all of it can be attributed to Hugh Freeze and the coaching staff or the offensive line or X, Y, or Z.
Turns out it wasn't all Bo Nix's fault either.
Correct. It's an everything. It wasn't all Gus Malzahn's fault either. It's an everything thing. But if you can improve these components, can it all come together and work together really, really well? And if it doesn't, I think we're going to figure out, okay, what the real problem is or what the biggest problem is.
I thought you were going to say that the thing we're saying the most going into this season is, it's almost any topic on the team. We'll see. that is. I mean,
and that's preseason football in general. But it's really that way this year for a team that is, went into the portal with so much, and then even the guys they brought in that are homegrown, so to speak, there's still questions. We think that Cam Coleman and DeMarcus Riddick and Malcolm Simmons and the list goes on, Jay Crawford, Caleb Harris, all these guys that we saw play big roles for last year. We think these guys are going to be really, really good. But, there's still questions and there's still room to grow for each of them. There's even questions and room to grow for a guy like Keldrick Falk, who has got as much hype as any. I mean, dang, Dan, Keldrick Falk has more Keldrick Falk has had more preseason hype for any Auburn defensive player since
Derek Brown.
Since
Derek Brown.
It's got to be Derek,
and I think it wouldn't be all that shocking.
As good as Derek Hall was, as good as Colby Wooden was, as good as Roger McCreary was.
It wouldn't be all that shocking to see Keldrick as the earliest selection in the NFL draft for Auburn since Derek
since that first round run.
Yeah, since Derek was a top 5 pick.
And that's the thing with this upcoming team.
It's also one time I had him 10th overall in a recent.
Yeah, he is. It's hard to find a draft that doesn't have him as a first rounder. And there's
one
a
of
lot.
The first 2 or 3 SEC players off the board.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a whole season to go through on that. But the new college football game's already out. He's one of the top. Keldrick Falk's one of the top rated players, defensive players in the country on that game, and well deserved.
That's a position too where, I would say the prognosticators hit at edge rusher. The guys they all agree are all world edge rushers are the guys that you are still seeing 5 years later, 10 years later, playing football.
Because if you're just a dude that gets a lot of numbers and you don't have the game behind it, it usually gets weeded out pretty quick.
Yeah, offensive tackle is a tougher thing to project as far as how's this guy going to do at the NFL level. I suspect,
and there were, I guess there were a lot of different factors here, but we talked about Greg Robinson earlier. On paper, Greg Robinson should have been a perennial Pro Bowler, and he was good for a stretch, I think, in his career. But again, you can't predict all those kind of things. Defensive end, edge rusher is a lot more that dude can play and you can see it. That one's easier to turn on the film.
We saw Kayvon in the Auburn Oregon game, right? We saw it was you know what? He's going to play forever.
I always go back to Myles Garrett.
Yep.
I saw Myles Garrett single-handedly ruined Auburn's offense that game, and I guess that would have been 16. Yeah, it was just he was. I remember the story. It was Gus. I think it was Gus Malzahn saying it may have been Red at that point too, talking about it. But it was he kind of. I remember him in a press conference kind of explaining. He was yeah, here's the thing. When we run that zone read, you're reading him, right? And we couldn't read him correctly because he was taking both options. Because what they had taught him to do was just say, hey, you run to the mesh point and hit whoever has it. And it's most of the time you can read and make a guy commit one way or another, but when you're Myles Garrett and you're that fast and that long and have that kind of wingspan, you can blow up that play a lot more easy. I guess a lot more easily. Yeah, there you go. A lot more easy. Great grammar from the professional writer on here. Anything else you want to add about the offensive line?
No,
it's an intriguing spot to be in because I think I'll say this: I have more faith in Auburn being better on their offensive line this season than I do at quarterback. And that's not saying that I don't think they can be better at quarterback because I think they could be. It's just there seems to be more substance behind what you're bringing in guys in Chaplin and Murphy that if they stay healthy, they were good pieces. Jackson Arnold is a potential heavy, some good, some bad, but he's got a ways to go as well. I'll say this. When you look at Chaplin and Murphy and you could say, if they're what they were at Virginia Tech and USC respectively at Auburn, you're in a good spot. If Jackson Arnold was what he was at Oklahoma at Auburn this season, that's a tougher spot to be in.
What's so interesting about that, too, is that you don't have a runway for Jackson Arnold to improve. You don't have time for Jackson Arnold to find his groove. You've got
because when they play Baylor on that first Friday night, that Baylor offense has a guy that's ready.
And then you've got 2 paycheck games, and then Jackson Arnold goes to Norman, where he was the quarterback for a couple years. And can you imagine? We've talked about it in the past, like the thought of the and I don't know exactly how bitter the divorce is between Arnold and Oklahoma. They went in a different direction, and now they've got John Mateer. But it's like it can't be easy for a quarterback to go face his former team and in his former house wearing a different color. So it's there's in contrast to last year when you had a returning starting quarterback who had played a lot of college football at a high level and was and seemingly had a couple of games against less talented opponents to get yourself ready for Oklahoma and Georgia and Alabama down the road. You've got real tests the moment the season starts. And maybe that's going to be to your benefit. Maybe Auburn had a false sense of confidence from the way they dispatched the paycheck game opponents last year, and that worked against them ultimately against Auburn had the home run derby against Alabama A&M, and then a week later against Cal.
Couldn't do it.
It didn't work. Maybe some again. I don't know. I think it's probably looking back
because they were doing that when they were in the doldrums. Like,
exactly.
I've seen some of the worst Auburn teams be able to hang a lot of points on
the question would, and it's unknowable, but the question would be like if Auburn had opened against Cal, would anything have been different about that game, or was anything about the Cal game influenced by what Auburn did to Alabama?
I mean, I think maybe the most tangible part about that would have been like, would Auburn have been sharper earlier in the year because of the focus they had to have? Because it's like, okay, we've got to be good in week 1. Because even though we all thought Auburn was going to be able to beat Cal at home, they were in a dogfight and needed to pull a rabbit out of the hat a couple times to beat Cal on the road again.
Didn't it feel like two drives in, you're like, oh no, we're in another dogfight? Like this game, like you watch these two teams
and
play,
it got
like,
progressively worse. Yeah, it got progressively worse.
And you know what? And this year, again, it won't tell you anything about last season, but the fact
I remember saying heading into last season, I remember saying like the Cal game was like, how much better Auburn is or isn't, we're going to tell in that game. And then after that game, it was like, well, they don't look like they've improved.
Although Cal was a little bit better early than people thought, but they were also one of Florida State's 2 wins. Yeah. So I mean, it wasn't. But no. And this year, in contrast to that, going to Baylor. Yeah. Friday night. The world of college football will be watching.
Borderline top 25 team, maybe.
Absolutely. And the fact that it's a game. I think that on Saturday,
Baylor could win the Big 12, could make the playoff this season.
I think with this slate on college football opening weekend, if this game were on Saturday, it could get lost in the shuffle of everything going on. You've got Ohio State, Texas on Saturday, which could very well be. We looked this up on the drive. If those 2 teams are 1 and 2 in the preseason poll, we've never had 1 versus 2
to open the year.
To open the year, and we could have that big noon. And I mean, who knows how much promotional there will be for how much promotion there will be for that game. During
was Auburn Miami that year? That was that
Auburn. I believe Miami was outside the top 5 in the preseason. We looked into that. That ended
up being a really good Miami team.
There was a 1 versus 2 Ohio State Texas game when Troy Smith won the Heisman. That team that lost to Florida.
That was like week 2.
It was week 2. It was week 2, but they did not play. They did not play opening day. But it's crazy that it's the same 2 teams. Nearly 20 years later could open.
I mean, I think if you look at the history of college football, especially the last 50 or so years, you could a safe bet is thinking Ohio State and Texas are going to be pretty good.
The year Bama beat Florida State on opening day, I want to say it was 17. Like Florida State was coming off a pretty good season, and I think they were
the Labor Day game.
I think they were in the top 5 that year. Because the quarterback breaks his leg against Alabama like opening day, and it's really never the same for Jimbo and the gang at Florida State. Like that was 1 versus probably like 4 or 5 in to open the season. But we've never had 1 versus 2, and we could have that. So I think if Auburn and Baylor were playing on that,
it was 1 versus 3.
Okay, so as that's pretty close. But we've never actually had a 1 versus 2 situation, and for Auburn Baylor to be same network the night before. I think the world of college football is going to be watching Auburn Baylor on Friday night. in a way in a way they probably wouldn't be if it were one of a series of games on Saturday. Like I think there's some special attention being paid to Hugh Freeze, and hopefully they can take advantage of that opportunity.
It can be very interesting to see what the atmosphere is like that is for that game. I'm sure it's going to be big. It's going to be a blackout and all that for Baylor. Do wonder though, Friday night it's a pretty big deal in Texas for high school football. Like I just wonder how much of an impact that's going to have.
RG3 used to play on Friday night a lot when Baylor was like struggling. Like I remember early on, like that was a way for like ESPN to get a Big 12 game on Friday night, and so you'd see.
Do you remember
Baylor, Kansas State or something?
2012. Do you remember?
Blocked out a lot of that season.
No, but this has nothing to do with Auburn.
Okay.
Do you remember 2012? Baylor played ULM on a Friday night, and that was when ULM was running the 2-quarterback.
That was Tony Franklin
formation.
That was Tony Franklin ULM, right? Or was that no? That's I'm thinking La Tech.
Yeah, that was La Tech. 2012, like
the 2-quarterback ULM team.
It jogged my memory though. It was like Baylor playing on Friday night because he used to do that a good bit, but like that was around that same time. Baylor, it was Louisiana Monroe, and I remember watching a drive of that game. Louisiana Monroe ran a 2-quarterback formation where they had them stand next to each other, and it was like you didn't know who was going to take the snap, and you didn't know who was going to take the handoff, you didn't know who was going to throw the ball, and it was a gimmick, but it like moved the ball for a decent amount of time. And I just remember, and I never saw it ever again, and I hate it. Like I want to see that again.
I remember Al Borges was once asked about that in one of the radio appearances we did, where it was like, did you ever consider having Cody Burns and another quarterback in the backfield and sort of running an offense where you didn't know who was going to be?
You're basically playing like a flag football offense.
And I think he had said that they had a formation where Cody was where any of where there was a running back on each side of the quarterback, and any of them could get a direct snap, and I think they had passing plays out of that to all three of them, but they never used it in the game. That was sort of like
we've seen some wildcats in the past where it's like the trigger man's a quarterback and then another guy on the field's a quarterback as well. Like you'll see that they had the the Ravens had the Heisman package at one point that had multiple guys like that in the backfield. But yeah, I don't know. It just jogged my memory. I wish we had more of that kind of stuff because that was a whole lot of fun. All right, let's wrap up with our new off-season tradition of top fours, Quadservers, what's in the box, whatever Dan wants to call it. What do you want to call it?
No, I think it's I'm gonna stop fighting the. If the
Quadserver's been the one that we've heard the most.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was going to say we can go with top four. Quadservers. It's a bit of a clumsy portmanteau, but I'm on board.
You can hit it.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm so yeah. Let's play. Let's play a little box.
By the way, when we're talking about wordplay here, I will say this because we are coming up in the middle of July. We're getting closer to the middle of July. And after we come back from media days.
Oh, boy. I know what you're talking about.
Grubserver.
That's right.
We're going to get that going.
Put on your bib.
Get ready. We are going to do, and as we said last year, Grubserver this year, which if you're new to us, we do an episode every August. We've done this the last few years. We do an episode also recommendations of places to eat in the Auburn-Opelika area when you are coming into town for a game day. So we've done that a couple times. This year, we decided we are going to make that an award show and have you guys out there, listeners and readers and subscribers, vote on it. After we come back from media days, I'm going to start putting those ballots together so we can I'll leave ample time for a lot of people to vote, and then we'll roll that out. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Should be a lot of fun this year. And also, Dan's apparently continuing to make moves on the live show.
We're working on it, folks. We're working on it.
All right, here is a top for a Quadserver suggestion from our guy Tyler. Tyler says, "Give me the top 4 Auburn names." Meaning, I'll give you his examples. His 4 favorite names of athletes in Auburn history. He mentioned King Dunlap and Smoke Monday. So that's the kind of we did nicknames not too long ago, or I did nicknames not too long ago, because I still think Trey Blackman Little Ball of Hate's like the best nickname ever. but
Cadillac's in a different stratosphere.
Correct.
As a nickname, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but I'm talking about like favorite nickname.
Yeah.
Like you can't.
Which started as a nickname, right? Like Cadillac started as a Cadillac and Tank are are fantastic. Like they're outstanding nicknames, and they're outstanding nicknames that get to that grow to the point where they're your where they just take over as your first name. Like that's the mark of a truly great nickname, and both of those guys had them. So I guess and I think we had them both in our just overall best nicknames. But yeah, I would think that Cadillac and Tank are two of the great names that have come through the program.
I'll give you a suggestion. I'll throw one out here. An all-time great name, and I think it got a lot of love outside of Auburn. Because like on these all name teams and stuff like that, when you talk about offensive linemen, is there a better offensive line name in Auburn history? Like King Dunlap's pretty good. Is there a better offensive line name in Auburn history than Brodarius Ham? Like both of those names work so well for an offensive lineman.
Shout out to Brodarius, man. Just a guy who
all-time great.
Just one of the all-time best dudes, and a guy who waited his turn in a way that you probably wouldn't in modern college football with the ability to transfer that guys have. Like he sat behind some pretty good offensive linemen waiting his turn and then finally got his shot. And I would think that's one of that's a great call.
I think I always go back to Brodarius Ham as like an all-time great name.
Okay, so I'll go back to your Tuberville era.
Okay.
I always thought, and it helped that he was a fullback who wore 44, but Jake Slaughter.
Is a great name.
Jake Slaughter is a great name for a fullback, right? Like and he was a great dude too. Absolutely a killer. But like Auburn was blessed with, and you know what? And since we're in that same era, like Tommy Trott is also sort of in that is in that is in the ballpark, and as always, big shout out to Tommy. But like no, Jake Slaughter, I just thought had like that is a movie character.
Yep.
Like that's like Jack Reacher should be named Jake Slaughter, right? Like that should be Reacher's name, but it's not. Jake Slaughter, a former Auburn fullback, is going to make my list.
It's a great one, man. I'll switch over to basketball, and this one's kind of a you got to throw the nickname in there as well for it. But when you think about big men in basketball, if you just said, "Hey, my basketball team has a dude named Babatunde Akingbola."
Oh, wow, okay.
And here's the thing about Stretch. Here's the thing about Stretch is that like the name Babatunde Akingbola, Stretch Akingbola. When you say that and say, "Hey, I have a guy on my sports team named Babatunde Akingbola," I immediately think shot blocker. Like the mind immediately goes to, "Oh yeah, that dude's an eraser under the rim." Incredibly fun name to say. Also, awesome dude. Shout out to Stretch. Glad he got to finish his college career as a starter somewhere. But like that dude was such a valuable piece, like an unsung hero on those Auburn basketball teams.
How about dearly departed Cravatney Barber?
Vaught.
How about Vaught? Right. I mean, that's a guy who just. I mean, and there were some great and another phenomenal dude too. But like that's another. Like there were some great names on those late era Lebo teams. Quantez. I mean, there
Quantez Robertson.
Some great. So Tay Waller is one of our all time favorites. I mean, so there's some great names on that, and Vaught Barber is another one where it's like Cravatney Vaught Barber is a. I mean that is a name that is belongs on a marquee. Like that's an athlete. That's an athlete and a star athlete's name.
I know it's a nickname, but he went by it. Doc Robinson. Doc Robinson, but the whole aesthetic of Doc Robinson where it's like point guard, but a point guard who wore a crazy number for a point guard is also great. And then like, here's another one, Dan, from around that area. Scotty Pullman, that is like sniper. That is like, that dude is going to come in and wreck your world shooting the basketball. We got those are some good ones. I like that. That was some really, really fun ones. I like that one. So I'll say we'll do basketball. We'll do football here. Just real quick. I'll say Stretch Akingbola, Cravatney Barber. I think Doc counts. Do we have another one from? We had another one from that era.
I mean, do you want Quantes?
Yeah, we'll do Quantes. Yeah,
right,
Quantes.
Sure, yeah, you want Quantes?
And then football.
No, although the great story there too is that for those who don't know, I believe Dwayne Reed is a chain.
By the way, Tay Waller, also a great name.
Of course, yeah, and an OW Raider. So shout out to Northwest Florida State's Tay Waller. Dwayne Reed is a chain of pharmacies in the New York area.
It's what Walgreens are in New York.
Yeah, and
right?
it's spelled
something like that.
It's spelled with I believe it's Dwayne with a U.
Dwayne with a U and a Reed with an E.
Yes,
like at the end.
Yeah, with an E at the end.
A-D-E.
Auburn played in New York City when Dwayne Reed was on the team. And I believe he was unaware of this. And can you imagine going to New York City and suddenly there's
everybody's going down to Dwayne Reed,
and they're on every street. Like that's the other thing is they're commonplace.
They're Walgreens, right?
I think now something similar has happened to me where in
or CVS
in Hattiesburg, I think that's right. But in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and the surrounding area, there's a chain of gas stations called Dandy Dan's, and so when I'm in the area.
Wait, do you just think everything named after a guy named Dan is yours?
It's not. You're right. It's not. But Imagine my shock if it was Dandy Dan Peck's, right? And that's where. And that's Dwayne Reed was. Dan
Peck's and it's like a seed store or like a
exotic bird.
Dan Peck's Exotic Bird Emporium. Yeah, that's we got that one.
No, yeah. So yeah, but glad.
And then football. I'll say Broderius Ham, Jake Slaughter.
I had Cadillac and Tank sort of,
yeah,
and it feels like cheating.
But yeah,
feels like cheating a little bit. But at the same time, I would want both of those guys. You mentioned Broderius is a.
I think Broderius is my favorite. Yeah, of that name. All right, here's a fun one, Dan, off the beaten path a little bit.
John Vaughn's name rhymed too. I always like that.
John Vaughn is a great one for a kicker. Great. John Vaughn is any rhyming name. Automatically gets a win here. This one is a top 4 suggestion, a Quadserver from Carter. Carter says, with the new Superman and Fantastic Four movies coming out soon, I'd love to hear your 4 top superhero movies. I'm going back and forth for a couple for my 4th. This is Carter. But my other three in no order are Spider-Man 2, 2004.
Great call. That would be on my list.
The Batman.
Ooh, Robert The Batman.
Pattinson.
Okay.
The Incredibles.
Love the inclusion of The Incredibles.
And again, he's TBD on the 4th.
Which did very well on the New York Times list. The Incredibles was well represented. Hoping
not having The Dark Knight on here doesn't get me kicked out of the inner circle. I love the trilogy and I love Christopher Nolan, but Batman's one of my 2 favorite superheroes, and The Batman is a better Batman movie to me than any of the Dark Knight trilogy.
Matt Reeves, who directed the Batman and some of the Planet of the Apes films for Fox, also did the Let the Right One In remake, the American version of the Chloe Grace Moretz vampire movie from 15 years. I've seen that movie and it's pretty good. I like the foreign version better,
sure.
But it's but I'd forgotten that was a Matt Reeves production, and then I liked the Batman, but felt that I wasn't as enthusiastic as other people were about it. Like I thought it was well made. I thought there were a couple of fantastic performances. Paul Dano was like born to be a Batman villain, which sounds like an insult, but I swear it's not.
It's
like
not.
He absolutely crushed it, and yeah, I think. But okay, that's a very good list, and a couple. As much as I hate repeating like already mentioned films, I think that Spider-Man 2 is
Spider-Man 2 is a great
Spider-Man 2. I would go to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 with Alfred Molina and as Doc Ock, UCLA instructor Alfred Molina. As a matter of fact, I would say that's my favorite live action superhero movie ever, potentially, and certainly my favorite with Spider-Man at the center. Like if we're watching a Spider-Man movie and it can be any of the Maguires, any of the Garfields, or any of the Tom Hollands, I think the best movie on the board is Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. I think the second one there is the top option available. So I will definitely have Spider-Man 2 on my list.
So I'm gonna pick two right here, and because I can't separate them, and I'm going for here. And I've said this before. I think the best comic book movie ever, the best comic book movies ever, are the Spider-Verse Spider-Man movies.
Oh,
they are the most feel like a comic book, and as someone who was an avid Spider-Man comic book reader growing up, and still is to this day, I'm reading Ultimate Spider-Man. Me and Justin Lee are right now. It's a blast.
That first Spider-Verse movie is incredible. You're right.
Second one's amazing. And I want to see how they stick the landing with the second half of it. But like the animation, the dialogue, the feel, the vibe, even like fully embracing how crazy and even silly that the like multiverse thing can be, but still making it work. Like it's so like. I feel like MCU movies can get so like wrapped in themselves, basically, and get out of your brain a little bit when it comes to like the multiverse and all that. The Spider-Verse movies both of them did such a good job of that. Spider-Man's my favorite superhero of all time, by far. Those are my two favorite movies. I can't separate them. I got to pick both of them.
Okay,
so that's half of my Quadserver.
Okay, you can have if you want the Spider-Verse to be one of your four, you could do that too, depending on what else.
Take both of them.
Yeah, if you depending on what else you want to include. So I will take Batman Returns, 1992, Tim Burton, featuring Michelle Pfeiffer giving what I believe to be the finest performance by a villain in a comic book movie maybe ever as Catwoman. She is just in every scene breathtaking. DeVito's completely out of his mind doing the Penguin. I thought that Tom Hanks borrowed some of that for Elvis as far as what DeVito's doing in the Penguin. And Christopher Walken delivering a great performance too. And there's and it's just this weird dark it has, it probably peaks a little bit early, as far as the climax being, not the best part of the movie, but some of the performances just outstanding. Keaton, as always is great. So I'll take Batman Returns as my favorite of the films centered around the Caped Crusader.
Logan.
Yeah. Yes.
Logan
yes.
rules. And it is.
Yes.
It's probably the farthest departure from a normal superhero movie of like the big budget ones. Logan's awesome. The graphic novel it's loosely based on is incredible. Old Man Logan. Logan's great. And it kind of existing in its own world is awesome too. I love Logan.
James Mangold quietly having one of the best filmographies of any director in the 21st century. Like the Johnny Cash movie is phenomenal. The Bob Dylan movie was great. Logan is great. I liked the there's one that I'm forgetting. 3:10 to Yuma is really, really good. And I believe he did the Indiana Jones, the most recent Indiana Jones film, which was not warmly received at the box office, but I thought was a pretty fun Indiana Jones movie. But but the biopics and Logan are just top-notch movies in their genre, and yeah, that's a great call.
So I'll take the combo of the I'll take the Spider-Verse movies and Logan. That's 1 and 2 for me.
I feel like I want the MCU represented somewhere.
I'm gonna have the MCU.
Yeah,
sure.
I feel like I want the MCU represented, and I'm struggling with picking my favorite of those movies. And I think my favorite might shock people. I might go. Yeah, dude, I love Iron Man 3. I thought the Shane Black Iron Man 3 has like and the way it subverts expectations, and I mean the first Iron Man is a great choice too. But I would vote for give me Iron Man 3. Give me Shane Black sort of messing with people and some some really spirited performances around Downey Jr. So I'll take Iron Man 3 as sort of an off the beaten path sort of selection.
My MCU pick, I thought about putting Endgame on here because I think for what it was and what it pulled off is an accomplishment. It was like it needed to be the biggest movie in the world at that point, and it was. and it did a really good job of it. I thought not perfect, but did a really good job. My MCU pick though is the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Great movie, killer soundtrack. I think the other Guardians movies are great too. But the first one, because it introduces a lot of that and it just does really, really well. So many, Chris Pratt's great as Star-Lord, and there's a lot of really good characters. Like, it seems like every character in that movie that gets a decent amount of screen time does really, really well in it. All the supporting players are great in it. Guardians is probably the one I go back to the most. Like, I love that version of MCU is cool to me. Like that them kind of doing their own thing's a lot of fun.
Does the fact that James Gunn is doing the upcoming Superman film influence?
I will probably watch it. I have never been a Superman person. I've never really been a DC guy either. But I do like this. And another one that I thought about mentioning in here, honorable mention here, James Gunn, The Suicide Squad is a lot of fun. The first movie, the original Suicide Squad, is probably the worst movie I've ever paid money to see in a theater.
I got multiple angry looks during Suicide Squad for laughing when I wasn't supposed to. Seeing it in a crowded theater. Yeah. Multiple times.
When the lady who looks like the dude from Empire of the Sun is the dancing, like that whole part
Enchantress,
at the end.
Enchantress's dance. The Kanye West needle drop, I think, got
it's
that.
So bad.
Yeah.
But the Suicide Squad, which Peacemaker,
110-minute trailer.
The Cena is Peacemaker, Idris Elba. You get. I think the Margot Robbie.
She's having fun. She's having fun as Harley Quinn.
The Birds of Prey movie is good too. I think for what it is.
That stretch post.
But yeah, that's a fun one because that DC movie is fun because it subverted a lot of what you think of superhero movies. It's super violent. It's super graphic. It's like off the charts funny to me. That one was one I thought about throwing in there. But yeah, James Gunn does really good with these movies.
And I am excited to see what James Gunn has done with the with Superman. At times his instincts can get like very silly.
Yes.
And to a point where but at the same time, like maybe that's the right tone for Superman. And it sounds like he's really emphasized like it's important for Clark and Lois to have the chemistry, I think, for a Superman movie to work, and it sounds like that was something they really prioritized in casting these two leads. So yeah, I'm optimistic that they've figured things out because it's been tough at Warner Brothers when it comes to live action. I mean that stretch of the Wonder Woman sequel and The Flash and Shazam 2 and Black Adam and the Aquaman sequel and Blue Beetle. They went you don't get that many at bats before you get sent down. You don't get to come up empty that often. So maybe they figured it out. And I don't know what the move is if the Superman movie doesn't go for that studio. Okay, so I got one more. I was debating whether or not the Ninja Turtles or the Power Rangers were superheroes.
Oh yeah, they count.
Okay, I don't. As much fun as that first Ninja Turtles movie is, I'm not gonna. Honestly, The Incredibles is a great answer. Like that really.
I'm going back and forth on whether Incredibles is getting my last.
The Incredibles is a great.
You know what? Incredibles is going to get my last.
And the second one's good too.
Second one's really good. A rare Pixar sequel where I'm like, yeah, they did a really good job with that. The Toy Stories are good.
The first Wonder Woman would be on my.
Wonder Woman's great.
The first Wonder Woman would absolutely be in competition with. If
I had to put, so I realized I did 3 Marvels, which is just my bias. I did 3 Marvels and then The Incredibles. If I had to pick a DC in there, The Batman's great. I did do an honorable mention for the Suicide Squad. Maybe just they just need the like DC just needs to put the in front of things. And
if it's called The Wonder Woman, then the first
Superman would be pretty good too. But if I had to throw a DC movie, like again, as much as I like the Dark Knight trilogy and Nolan stuff, I'll go off the beaten path here with this one. The Lego Batman movie is
There you
incredible.
go. Yeah, Will Arnett.
And again, it's the same, and that's cheating a little bit because like it's the same kind of animation style that they end up doing for Spider-Verse. It's like the same crew basically. Lego Batman's really good. Yeah, but Incredibles.
And
I'll go Incredibles.
And I don't want beef with the Snyder folks, but like I think that
also Sam Raimi Spider-Man, the first two especially are like those were two of my favorite movies growing up. Third one not as much, but the first two were really good.
There are things I really like about both Man of Steel and the sequel to Man of Steel is the Batman versus Superman. That's the one that introduces That's the one that introduces Affleck. There are things in both of those movies that work, but the things I don't like ultimately win the day. I wouldn't have minded.
There are things I really like about Watchmen.
Yeah, sure.
The television series is incredible.
And there are like to me, I would have been interested to see. In fact, probably more than a direct sequel to Man of Steel, I would have been interested in a movie that introduced Affleck as Batman, sort of without the trappings of the rest of the DC verse. But trying to there's just so much introduced in one film in that Batman versus Superman to the point where there's a scene where characters are just watching trailers from upcoming DC films. It's like, oh, this is the Flash. Like he's gonna Skype into our movie real quick for 20 seconds or whatever. And it's like, but it's obviously trying to balance an entertaining movie now with world building is harder than ever with these with these Superman or superhero franchises. But yeah, when done well, it's a lot of fun.
Also, I don't want to be a pro Marvel DC haters because like I checked out a lot of most recent MCU. I'm
loyal to the Betty Boop, whatever is it Fleischer? Like whoever does the whichever company is doing like
Archie Comics. You're loyal to Archie.
I'm an Archie guy.
Riverdale. Not to seem like a too big of a because I will say.
Have I told the story on the podcast that I met the guy, the Sprouse twin?
Yes.
Okay, good. And he told me about Riverdale, and I said, like, I was polite, and I was like, yeah, but deep down, I was like, this doesn't seem like it's going to work, and it ended up being Riverdale. Yeah. So,
gotta trust that guy. I did say the original Suicide Squad is the worst movie I ever paid money to watch. I did not pay money to watch this one. I do think it might be worse than Suicide Squad. The last Ant-Man is wretched. It is one of the worst things I've ever seen.
I believe multiple cast members have retired from acting.
Michael Douglas and Evangeline Lilly have not done anything else since then.
After Ant-Man, yeah, it's not a superhero movie, but it's festive.
And then Paul Rudd said, "Let me just do a bunch of Tim Robinson stuff."
The other movie I remember getting dirty looks because at times it was like just unintentionally hilarious.
Elektra.
It's not a superhero movie, but it's seasonal. It's timely. It's the Independence Day sequel. The second, if you ever saw Resurgence, the second Independence Day movie has a lot going on in the second one, and I feel like they let Jeff Goldblum make up all his lines I feel like they let Jeff Goldblum.
Okay.
I feel like they let Jeff Goldblum totally improvise his entire part.
Kind of feel that way about a lot of Jeff Goldblum roles. Yeah, just let that man cook.
Tony Coles.
Hey, safe to say I'm the biggest, the largest. Been stepping up since my mama stayed in them apartments. Regardless, my daddy told me keep the heat even when I'm in foreigns.